Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sara Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And this week on the show we have
Kimbra Swain.
Yes, we do, and it was so great.
Yes.
Kimbra is an urban fantasy author, and she is so great about connecting with readers and has tons of ideas about that. It was really a fun interview.
Yeah, and she uses not just her books, but she has some marketing things that she does and Pateron to connect. So we talked about all of that. It was really good. We did have a couple of issues with the sound in this one, we will do everything we can to make it as clear as possible. But but stick with us because there's some really great really great information in this about how to connect with your readers and creating some different income streams, which we're all interested in. So
we are.
So that's coming up. Yeah. So what have you been doing?
I have been working on just some ideas that I have and the surprise project that I'm messing with. And that's about all I've been doing. I have done some consulting this week, which was, is always super fun. I love it. And so that's taken up some time. And
and you have openings, right? If anybody's interested in consulting.
I do. I have some openings, and it's just been so fun because, some of the people that I did consulting for before the first end of the year or right after the first of the year are now putting their books out, and just seeing them do well and knowing that some of the things they're doing are things we talked about. It's so satisfying. I love that so much. Yeah. So that's been great. And we're leaving to go to my granddaughter's 9th birthday party on Saturday, and we're starting birthday season, as we call it in our family. When you have 6 grandkids, there's a birthday season. So, so that's what we're starting, and so that's what's going on with me. Not a whole lot. How about you, Sarah?
Well, I'm getting back into the routine. I was out of town last week, so this week I've been working on editing. I've got to the end of my first round of revisions, and it is a book. It is okay. I'm going back in there now, fixing certain things and just doing editing and revision. So that's really good. Right. It feels good to be doing that. And I'm also working on, we had Russell and Monica on about a Kickstarter project.
Yes.
And so I've ordered a special cover. I'm going to do a hardcover. So I've been working with the cover artist on that, getting that all, ready to go. So that will probably be what I'll work on next.
Yeah. And you guys need to, if you're not in the Facebook group, join the Facebook group, because we are going to have an affiliate link for their webinar coming up. It's a free webinar. It is an affiliate link, so I just want y'all to know that. But it's like an encore webinar that they're doing, and they have had such great response, and people have loved it so much that they're doing it again. So if you're interested at all in Kickstarter, that is something you might want to sign up for, just to get the free webinar, because the free webinar is full of information that you can use.
So we'll have that link.
You don't have to sign up for the class if you don't need to.
Yeah, so we'll put that link in the Facebook group. So and I would definitely recommend if you're thinking of Kickstarter, definitely check that out, because
let me tell you, they know what they're talking about.
Good information. Yeah, very helpful stuff.
When we were at that conference a couple of weeks ago, that little mini conference, they were there, and oh my gosh, we sat and talked to them for almost an hour, and just super good information. And Russell really, really knows his stuff when it comes to Kickstarter.
Yeah, and has ideas of things that I would never think of doing in the way I'm thinking of structuring this Kickstarter campaign. I wouldn't have done, except that I talked to them. So anyway, so we will have that. And I think that's about all I've got going on. It's been kind of a quiet, mostly editing week. So not very exciting, but making progress. So that's good. So let's get on and talk to Kimbra.
Yeah.
All right. Here's Kimbra Swain. All right. Well, today we are really happy to have Kimbra Swain with us. Hi, Kimbra. How are you?
Hello. I'm good. How are you guys?
We're great. We're so happy you're here.
So let me read your bio and we'll get started. From early life, Southern urban fantasy author Kimbra Swain was indoctrinated into the ways of geekdom. Raised on Star Wars, Tolkien, superheroes, and Voltron, she found herself immersed in the world of imagination. She started writing in high school and completed her English degree from the University of Alabama in 2003. Kimbra still lives there with her husband and daughter. When she isn't reading or writing, she plays PC games, makes jewelry, and builds cars. That's a new one.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So tell us how you got into writing.
I got into writing very young. I did a lot of writing in high school. I was the kind of person that when I'd watch a television show or a movie or read a book and I wanted the story to continue, to keep going, I would, do my own versions of the story.
Oh, wow.
And so it kind of, it wasn't even a fan fiction thing because I didn't know what fan fiction was back then.
Yes.
But I also created my own stories. I think the first full-length story I wrote, I was a senior in high school, and it was a project in our English class to write something fiction, and it was a fairy tale. And I think that was my first writing. And then, of course, I did English in college, and so I did a lot of creative writing there. And I did some, submissions and things like that to publications and got those nice little, we're sorry, but this is not what we're looking for.
Thanks, but no thanks letters. Yeah.
And I really kind of gave up on it for a very long time. And I came back around to it because I got to reading. My husband got me into listening to an urban fantasy book that he was listening to on audio because he's an audible audio book kind of person. And I kind of fell in love with urban fantasy genre. So I started gobbling up all of that. Mm-hmm. And within 6 months, I was on beta reader teams for a couple of indie fantasy authors, and I didn't know what indie was. Mm-hmm. And when I mentioned to one of them that I used to write, they were like, "Why don't you do it now?" And then I was like, "Well, because I don't want to go through that whole writing letters and getting rejected." And they're like, "Oh, you don't have to do that anymore."
Yes, yes.
From that point, it kind of exploded into what I have now, which is still a little bit overwhelming and surprising to me.
Right. Tell us how many books you have.
It's over 60. I don't even know.
And how many?
It's over 60.
Wow.
I don't know how many. I don't know the exact count. I probably should know. It's one of those things that I don't file. Like my brain has lots of things, and that's just like one of the things I don't hold on to. So I can't tell you how many exactly it is. But
that's amazing.
And how long have you been publishing?
I published my first story in September 2017. So,
so you've been quite prolific.
I write a lot.
That is amazing.
It was like an addiction all of a sudden. Then I was like, oh, let's write a book and have fun. So I wrote a book and had fun. And I was like, that was a lot of fun. Let's do it some more. Yeah. And then I haven't stopped since.
That's great.
Oh, that is terrific.
That's just great. Yeah. Just for reference, y'all, I published in April of 2017. I have 7 books. So there you go. Same, but different.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. Well, what's your definition of success?
My definition of success changes all the time. Mm-hmm. Success, when I first did the first book, was just to put a book out there with my name on it and say, hey, I published a book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then after that, and then the bar moved, and it was like, okay, let's publish a series.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I get through 5 or 6 books, and I'm like, well, maybe I should advertise these books. And so
Right.
the ball of success kept moving. The successes, I like little successes instead of this big picture of, oh, I want to have all these things. And so I like to set small bars of goals for me. And when I hit one of those, that's a success for me. I'm not looking for the let's be rich and have a mansion and 10 cars and, all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for, it wasn't even a goal to become a full-time author at the beginning. It was just, hey, let's have fun and write some books.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it did become, let's do this full time. And now that I have been doing it full time for almost 2 years, it's okay, let's pay my bills and let's do special things for my daughter and save for vacations. And it's really like business goals. And that's kind of where I'm at now is
That's great.
I'm in a phase of changing from just doing just the writing and things to doing a lot of author things, going to events and speaking and things like that. So, and I enjoy that kind of stuff. So it's nice to be able to do that.
Right. And we should say you're speaking at InkersCon. You're on 2 panels. Is that right?
I am. Yep.
Yeah. One with Sara and myself, and we're talking about series, but the other one is on.
The other one is on merchandising, and
yes, which we're going to talk about later.
The panel is about diversifying your income. And so I'll be talking about the merchandising aspect of that. And then there'll be 2 other authors who talk about different aspects of, translations. And then there was another one I can't remember off the top of my head, but
yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Great. Yeah.
Well, that if you're listening in real time, that's InkersCon June 2022. If you're listening in the future, it may already be over.
Yeah.
But InkersCon is a conference that you can get the replays. So if you're listening later, then you can get that. So that'll be fun. We're looking forward to the panel.
I'm excited about it.
I'm looking forward to it. Any chance I get to see people in person, I'm like, so excited. So tell us what you wish you'd known about writing and craft when you started.
I think it's hard to quantify that for me because even though I do a lot of creative things, my writing is very creative. I'm a very logical person. I'm very half-brained, half left, half right. And so there are things that I know I shouldn't have known, but I'm glad I know now kind of thing. So I think one of the things looking back is I was very hard on myself in the beginning for finding things that I did that was stupid and really hard on myself for those things. And so I think I was, just learning the business itself takes time. Yeah. And I like to, I'm a number 1 learner on my skills. And so when I don't absorb the things I should have absorbed, it really bothers me. And so I think in the beginning, I knew that I wanted to put a bit of money into my first publication and make sure I had an edited document and I make sure I had a good cover and those kind of things, even though I wasn't really into the marketing side. But even then I did it wrong because I was a little stubborn thinking that, hey, I'm just going to do this for fun. And then, like I said, it turned into something else. And so I had to kind of retrack and rechange some things around. And I don't really regret them or call them mistakes, but it was it's a definite learning process.
Yeah.
But I think that's important because you did that. You made those slip-ups. We won't call them mistakes, slip-ups. But you're still super successful. And that series has done super well for you. So I think it's a good lesson and a good reminder that we can recover and still, the fact is you wrote a good book. I've read it. You wrote a good book. And so that carried you a good ways. So I think that's important.
Yep.
Yeah. That comes up again and again when we talk to people that they messed up, but they learned from it. And that's kind of why we're doing the podcast is, just to talk about the different things we've learned from. And so, yeah, it's not always a horrible thing when you mess up, because then at least we know how not to do things, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is how we learn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, what about marketing? What do you wish you'd known about marketing?
I wished I didn't know about marketing. I mean, I've learned a lot, but I think the thing that I've learned the most about marketing is you can't like sit still with marketing,
Right.
and because it's constantly changing, the algorithms and the way the ads are delivered and the way you market yourself to your groups and to the public and those things. It is a constant shifting process. There's a lot of change going on there, and I didn't do a lot of marketing when I was still working full time. I ran ads, and thankfully they were successful, and I'm not even sure how they got there because I didn't take really tutorials or anything like that. I did pick the brains of a couple of mentors while I was doing it, but I'm also the kind of person that likes to go out and find the answers myself. And so I did a lot of that researching, trial and error type stuff. But I wished I would have known when I started. And I think I got very lucky. I didn't actually start advertising until like the 4th or 5th book in my series. And I think that was probably the best way to go with it. And I still follow that now. I still have my initial push when I start a series, the first book in a series, but I don't really start pushing the whole series until I hit book 3 or book 4. And that's really when I start dumping money into it, because for me, and in the genre of urban fantasy, that read through is so important. And my series tied together, and learning how to write a series to be marketable is another thing that I learned very quickly, because I started asking questions about, because it shocked me when I put Bless Your Heart, Fairy Tales of Trailer Park Queen book 1 out. It was immediately, people loved it. And I was like, what is it about this book? And I started asking questions to the readers that were open enough. And thankfully I had a reader base. I was very blessed to have a reader base kind of from one of my mentors out there with people that I trusted and I could ask those questions to. And it really helped me in the beginning to write books that are marketable. You can dump a lot of money in ads and stuff, but if your book is not appealing, it's going to be hard to market that book. So.
Yeah.
And did you just ask your readers? Is that how you figured out like what the thing was that was appealing to them the most?
Yeah. When I started talking to the readers, and I had several, when I first started, I had an art group of about 10 people, because I'd been in art groups and I kind of drug people from other authors with permission, art readers into my group. And it was nice to say, I was even kind of questioning, is this really urban fantasy? Because it's a small town, even though it's modern, and there's a lot of magic and fairies and a lot of different creatures in it. Is this really fitting the genre? And because I questioned that a lot in the beginning, and I knew that it was important to know what genre I was in so that I could market it that way. And they were all very, yes, this is absolutely. And not only that, it's something you don't see often. And
so, it's fresh. It's a fresh idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And I think that's the biggest thing I came out of it was we don't see a lot of Southern-based things. And the people that were Southern or had connections to the South was like, it's so authentic to the area that has that appeal to it because of the authenticity. So I think that's, from the beginning, that's where I got a lot of the encouragement from.
Yeah, I can see that. So what assumptions did you make at the beginning of your writing career, and looking back, did they turn out to be right or wrong?
I assumed I couldn't make money doing it.
Yeah.
I assumed that it was just going to be, because I'm very aware of how many books are out there, and I'm very aware of all the people that upload books every single day.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'll have a few friends and coworkers buy this book, and some few of the connections I've made through reading books all the time. But I never ever thought I would write a bunch of books, and I never thought that this would be my full-time job.
Right.
And I never thought that anybody in the author community would ask me for advice. Like, how do I do this? And I'm like, you're asking me?
Yeah.
And so I think those are assumptions that I made in the beginning that necessarily weren't bad assumptions. They were just really wrong.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when people do decide, but I did have kind of a business, even though I didn't intend to make it a business. My mentor had a very business mind, and he was like, get you an LLC, set up all these things, get your accountant and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm not going to need all this stuff. He said, trust me, just do it. And so I did, because he said, it was like, okay, this guy knows better than me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I made all those assumptions, but I still set myself up right. And I think that's part of everything I've learned is going forward. I try to set myself in a best position. You can't predict everything, but you can put yourself in a best position. So,
right. That's awesome. That's great. And you said something that I wanted to circle back to. I can't remember what it is now. Not enough coffee this morning. I think it's important that you took wise advice. Like, again, I talk about this all the time. If you're going to ask somebody for help or their advice, and they take the time to give it to you, then at least be courteous enough to try it. And you did that. And I think that's important too. When you come upon that, I think that's important that you follow through on that. So I don't think that's what I was going to say, but that gets me out of the hole. So there you go. So.
Good job.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And it's so much easier to set all that stuff up in the beginning rather than the middle of your career, which is what I did, which I do not recommend. So do what Kimbra says.
Do what Kimbra says for sure.
Well, we've already talked a little bit about mistakes and like things you've learned. And is there, can you think of any mistake that turned out to be a good thing? We've kind of touched on a couple of things, but anything that comes to mind with that?
Specifically, I tried to think of something for this, and I really couldn't think of anything other than just the whole aspect of the mistakes that I made ended up being good things in the learning process, which is kind of an obvious. But I think I don't know. I can't think of anything specifically that I made a happy mistake. I mean, I don't know. It's unless you count, setting the business up and not really knowing what I was getting myself into. I really had no clue what, and I wasn't even, I don't fully understand indie publishing now, but 4.5 years ago when I started this, I really didn't know anything. And I was getting into it and I didn't even know I was getting into it. I was just like, oh, okay, so this is the way you put out a book.
Yeah.
And so it was, I think a happy mistake is I sat down, I wrote a book and I published it.
Exactly.
Yeah. A lot of people get hung up on learning and you're a big learner and I am too. That's really high on my strengths. And so like you can spend all the time learning things and never actually releasing a book, so I think that's good.
That's a huge thing too. And I've talked to people who haven't published and they're writing and they've asked me questions and I'm like, at some point you've got to let go and just put it out there.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly brave thing to do.
Right.
You have to have a lot of courage to just put it out there and let it go and see what happens. And there's ups and downs and there's things that people say and you're like, oh God, why did I do this? But overall, it's always a good thing because you're achieving something you want and you never know until you get out there and do it.
Right. Exactly. What's the biggest mindset shift that you've had in your career?
I'd say the biggest mindset was, like I said, I kind of put it out there starting it off as a business. And I'd had personal side businesses before. So the business model of doing things wasn't new to me. And so it was automatically kind of that thing for me. But I think that when my husband and I started talking about my previous job, and that's where the building cars comes in. I worked in the automobile manufacturing industry for 15 years at a very large plant for a luxury car. And I was in a body shop, so I know how to weld, and I know all the technology and stuff that involves with building cars and body work and those kind of things. And I did like my job, but physically it was very difficult for me. I worked 2 weeks days, 2 weeks nights. I had had a child. My daughter was born in 2010, and we got to the point where she was almost to go into kindergarten. And I was working those swing shifts, and she was spending half the time with my parents because of my shifts and my husband's work. And I told him at some point, I said, this has got to give. And I've got this income from, the books. And it was a full-time income at that point, but we never even considered walking away from the job that I had, because it was, I made good money, and I made really good money for where I live in the demographic and the cost of living. And so it was a difficult situation to say, okay, well, this is what we're going to push for. And then when we got there, the mind shift of, okay, now I have all this time, right, to write and full time. And it's really not that either. It's not anything like I thought it would be when I went full time. I think I have less time now than I had when I was working full time.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny how your mindset changes when you realize, when you think something like, this is going to be this way, I'm going to write all day, and I'm going to have all these books. And no, it does not happen.
I even bought like a cardigan sweater to wear in Texas because I thought, oh, that's the look I'm going for. Yeah, it didn't.
The writerly look.
Yeah. And did you find it to be more pressure when you quit your day job? I mean, did writing become less fun, or are you just one of those people that just makes that switch and it doesn't really affect you?
No, it affected me. It had quit, and that was in 2019, my full-time job in August 2019. And then in 2020, the year started off. I mean, I know everybody knows COVID kind of hit around the March area, but I had a grandparent that died, and my husband had a grandparent that died within a week, in the first week of January. And so we immediately went into from that into the COVID. And so it was like, I had my daughter at home, homeschooling, and
oh my gosh,
it was a lot of pressure to continue putting out at the same rate that I was before, and to try to justify the time. So now I have all this time on my hands, but I really don't. I calculate I get about 5 hours during the day between driving my daughter to school and bringing her home and us doing homework and just doing house stuff. I really only have 5 hours a day. It's not, even though I was working 10 and 12 hours a day when I was, working full time, I don't have that 10 and 12 hours now.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of pressure, and it still is for me to mentally justify my time. So, what am I doing during this time and this place to kind of make my business continue? And there's a lot of pressure in that.
Yeah. I think that. What'd you say?
I said it's not easy peasy.
No, it's not. Well, and in your situation, you're managing your emotions too, because you're grieving, and then your husband's also managing his emotions because he's grieving, and then the pandemic hits, and now you're managing your child's emotion because she's home. And I mean, it's a lot. I mean, for me, it was a big switch. I had more focus, I think, when I was working than when I started doing this full time, because you knew you only had these
a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always tell people that sometimes writing full-time shouldn't be the goal. Not because you can't do it, but because maybe you're not set up to do it. Maybe that's not, and I'm not sure I'm that person, honestly. But now I'm here, and as I've said before, I'm unemployable, so I could never work.
Yeah, I think I'm unemployable now too.
Oh yeah,
I'm like, I don't know that I could, but I mean, I think this is a good structure for me. I've just, it's a constantly changing structure, and you're constantly having to adapt to everything else.
Yeah. So. I love what you said about can't sit still, because that's not just about marketing. That's kind of about everything. And I think during the pandemic, I did sort of sit still, like especially this last year, even though we're sort of coming out of it. I listened to a podcast today. We're not, but whatever. But I'm doing this with my hands, like making a circle, because that's how my year looks in my head. But I really, I think I just sat still because I had just had so much emotional stuff and everything. And when you sit still, things change really fast, and then you have to play catch up, and that's hard.
Yep. And I think too, we're very involved with the Clubhouse community with authors, and there are several authors in there. I've heard them talk about they got into burnout, and then it ended up lasting a year or 2 years or 3 years. And I'm like, I cannot imagine being away from the business that long and trying to play catch up, because it's one thing to learn things new, but it's a different thing to change the way you know. And so when you get to that point, and so that's why it's really, really important for us, whether you're doing it full time or whether you're not, is that you keep your mindset and your mental health very well, because you can't let yourself get into that burnout stage. And people ask me all the time, do you feel like you're in burnout? I mean, I've written a lot of books. I've put out a lot of stories, and they're like, are you burning out? And writing has never burned me out. Life has burned me out.
That's what I say.
Writing is my escape from life, just like reading was my escape from life. And so that's just my outlet, that when everything on the outside gets crazy, like 2020 was crazy. I mean, in 2020, I also had 5 surgeries because I had an issue come up with my health. And while everybody else was going through COVID, I was, every other month having a surgery. And it was very, very difficult. It was a very rough year. And there were times that all I wanted to do was go home and pull out my laptop so I could write. And so, I tried to keep my mindset on this is my happy place, and I want to make sure that my happy place stays stable. So,
I think that's terrific. Yeah. And when you're talking about like the time in your day when you transition from being very super focused to having the whole day, it is a huge transition. And the other day I was keeping track. I don't do this very often, but I realized I really only had about 4 hours in the day to work, like all the other time is taken up with other things, just other commitments and things. And it's not every day is like that. But if you're expecting 8 straight hours of writing time, and then you end up with like 3 to 4, of course it's going to be disappointing, so it's a huge transition. It's a huge transition. But anyway, so let's get on to some other topics we're going to cover. One of them was merchandising. So can you tell us about your merchandising and book boxes, right? You do that as well. Is that part of it?
That's part of it. Yeah. I have always, like I said, I've always had kind of a side business. Okay. And the previous side business I had before I did this, I was making jewelry and selling jewelry at craft shows and things like that. And so I've always liked having that hands-on merchandise thing. I was in the retail business for a while before I ever got into the manufacturing business. I worked in several different retail situations, and it was always in a behind the scenes kind of thing. I'm not good at standing out on the floor and talking to people, but I do like the back end of that kind of stuff. So I was constantly dealing with, merchandising and wholesale and things like that. And when I first started doing this, and I also like art. I'm a very artistic, crafty person. And so I wanted to be able to use that. And I started off very small doing that. When I would go to some of my signings in the beginning, I would take a few of my books and then I would make tumblers and have tumblers and
Oh, wow.
a few other things. So I started really small with the merchandise. And as I continued it, it became something that I really enjoyed doing. And I started researching the book boxes that were come out. And I had met a couple of people from Fae Crate at a con because I do a lot of sci-fi fantasy cons with my books. And I had talked to them about the crates and stuff. And I'd looked at it. And okay, one of the reasons why I'm an indie author, and I tell everybody this, is because I like to have control of what I'm doing. And so what they have is a great product. It's like, man, I can do this myself. And I like to do things myself. That's an independent streak that I have.
Yeah.
And so the first book box that I put together, I kind of went online and I looked at a few other authors that were doing it. And then I said, okay, that's great, but this is how I'm going to do mine. And I kind of just set out to picking a theme is very important. If you're thinking about doing merchandise on the scale of boxes, there's so much that goes into it, and I've learned so much about it as I've gone along. But I would say if you're going to think about doing that kind of stuff, start small and then see how your reader base responds to it and then move forward. I have other merchandising outlets because I have a TeePublic site, so I do T-shirts and products and stuff on there. And that's more to me is more of a fan service type thing because I don't make a whole lot of money on that, but I love seeing pictures of my readers with a T-shirt on or using a book or a book bag or whatever they got from.
Right.
So that's a big deal for me. And then I had started up my online store just to do signed books. And then I was doing the tumblers and people were seeing them a lot in the, face-to-face events. And then we went into COVID and I was like, okay, well, I can put these online. And I started doing those. And then the next thing is I've started making jewelry to go with because I still have all my jewelry stuff where I used to make jewelry. So I was making jewelry. And then I started thinking about what are the other things that I could do and tie into books. And I started writing things into my books to make them merchandise. And so it went from just reacting to being proactive in my merchandising. So there are certain pieces of jewelry, or say there's a tattoo, or there's something that goes on in the book that I can turn around and make a temporary tattoo, or I can make a piece of jewelry to go with, or if a character likes a certain kind of my big thing that I have right now is I have a side series that I've been working on for a while that's loosely related to Trailerverse that's called the Oddities Emporium. And basically a guy owns a oddity shop. And if you've seen these oddities and curiosities type shows and stores, they have really creepy, weird kind of stuff in them. And I went into one of those in Kansas City, Missouri with some friends. I was at an author event there. And some of the readers and I went into one of those stores and I was just like, this would make a great story. And that expanded to, okay, I'm going to write a story about a store, but I'm also going to have a store. And so I have an online store that's the Oddities Emporium. And I sell a lot of esoteric items, tarot cards, rocks. I have lots of rocks, which feeds my little bit of the science I have in my head. I've always loved geology and astronomy and stuff like that. And so, and I have a whole selection of crystals and things that I sell through my website. And really, when things kind of took a downturn toward my downturn didn't start until the end of 2020, when I really started seeing a difference in my income from the effects of COVID. And having those extra things really got me through those times because it was a supplemental income And thankfully, I had the capital from my books doing well to turn it into that merchandise stuff. I don't ever put myself in a situation where I've, buy a bunch of stuff and then I'm
Then you
out.
have to sell. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
Don't get me wrong, I have a whole basement of stuff. This is another thing when you do merchandising, do it based on which space you have. Because
Yes.
when you start doing crates and things like that, you need to have space because it can get overwhelming very quickly.
Yeah.
And so it really just expanded into this huge thing. And I love every minute of the merchandising as much as I love writing books and putting them out.
Right.
That's terrific.
Yeah, I've seen Willa Winter's videos of her, her entire house is floor to ceiling boxes and stuff.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah. Crazy.
Well, quick question.
I looked at when I first started looking at boxes.
She's great at that.
She just kills it.
Yeah. Quick question about merchandising. I think people will be curious. Do you market mostly to your readers through like your newsletter, or is it on your website? Do you have people, or do you still do signings? How do you market it?
Most of the marketing goes through my Facebook group is super active. And so a lot of that goes through there. I am the world's worst newsletter sender. World's worst. I don't even know how I've gotten this far without,
But you release regularly, so you're probably fine, right?
But like last year I probably sent 5 newsletters all year.
Oh wow!
So you just show that there's all kinds of ways to do things. It's totally fine.
Yeah, but and when I do, they're effective, and I'm like, oh, I should do this some more.
Yeah.
But I do it through the newsletter, but most of it goes through my Facebook group, and then the Oddities Emporium has its own Facebook group, and so the people who are really into the stuff that I sell through Oddities are part of that group. And I don't have enough followers yet on TikTok, but I'd like to do some live events on TikTok with some of my merchandise, just because it's really nice to be able to sell stuff and people be able to see it. I do Facebook lives when we'll have a crystal sale, and then I'll tell them what kind of items is going to be in it, give them some teaser pictures, and then I'll do a Facebook live and show the items. And those, it's a really good marketing technique for those kind of things, because people see something like, oh, I got to have that. And it's on their live right now. And it's like, when I was a kid and my parents would sit and watch QVC.
Oh yeah.
When it first came out, and then my parents were like, oh, super today's special value, I've
got to have that cubic zirconium pendant.
And when it showed up, we were like, why did I buy this? But
the box comes and you think, did I order something?
Yeah.
Yeah, what is it? You order so much you don't even remember what's in it. So having that ability to do things live and sell things that way, and it creates a whole nother level of connection between you and your readers. Yeah. And you talk about, I love what is that does the oh gosh, she's RWA, and she did I had her, Jennifer Lynn Barnes.
She does the id list,
doing fandoms and how they grow, and that's really how an indie author can do it. Is a way to do it is to build that extra layer of, to me, that's what the merchandise is. It's more than just me selling stuff. It's me, I get to know my customers, the customer part of my readers, a lot better, because I'll do, hey, what did you like? What was your favorite thing of the last crate? What items would you like to see in a crate? I do these polls all the time, and I have a master list of crate ideas. And I haven't counted to see how many there is, and I have a book that I'm going to be doing on it for indie authors, that'll hopefully come out in the next month or so, that will have that my master list on it. So it'll have all the lists in it of all the ideas that I've come up with along the way. And some of, I can't claim all of them, you know,
Right.
I've done the research to see what, and I did some surveys a while back. I got to go through those, to authors and to readers of what they like to see in merchandise. And so all of that information will be in that book when I get to putting it out. But it's a joy for me. I enjoy having that
Yeah.
extra.
You can tell. You can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I enjoy having that extra connection and creating things that are a surprise. I mean, I love it when they get a box and they videotape themselves opening the box and they take each item out and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
even if I only see one of those per crate, I'm thrilled. That has made my day. And so
that's so great.
Sounds like it's a great way to stay in touch with your readers. And I think it could be really good for somebody. I mean, I know you release a lot, but something like that could be really good for somebody like me who doesn't release as often. You could really connect with readers. So is your Patreon sort of the same thing? Is it just a different way to stay in touch with your readers?
Yep. My Patreon is just a different way. Stay in touch with my readers. And I connect the two a lot because I do give my Patreon people discounts on the merchandise. I give them, the crates are limited edition. I do limited edition. I have a cap of how many of them I sell. And so I say that, hey, there's going to be 75 of these. My Patreon people get first dibs. And so they get to buy it a week ahead of everyone else. But I also do, my Patreon is where I get really down and dirty and personal with my readers. I will straight up go in there one day and say, hey, look, I have a migraine today and it sucks and it's hard to write. Do you ever find something that, you know, and it's nice to have those personal conversations with people. And that's the Patreon is where I do that. I also do a serial story there for Patreon. They get my books before anybody else. They get free copies of the books depending on what level they subscribe. They get at what level they make the audio book too, depending on how far up the level they go. And I learned a lot of tips and tricks of Patreon from I'm so bad with names today. Dakota Kraut, who does Split RPG. He is a master of Patreon. His Patreon group is insanely good, and he is a really great person too. And so I learned a lot about Patreon. And one of the things he said when he was talking about it to me really stuck with me. He said, you know, you are just giving your fans an opportunity to be closer to you and not to regret or question that amount of money that they're spending, because these are people who want that. I'm not giving them anything that interferes with the normal storyline of my books and releasing of my books. Everything they get is extra, and they're willing to go the extra mile. And some of them tell me, hey, I've subscribed, and even if you don't get a chapter to us every week, I'm still going to stay because it's helping you out.
Oh, that's great.
You have readers like that out there, and if you give them the opportunity to do it, they'll do it. And Dakota said, you know, I have this, and I have the level too, just because he said it. There's a $1,000 a month level, and it's, if you subscribe to the $1,000 a month level, I will get on a plane and fly anywhere in the continental United States, and we'll sit and have dinner. And he was like, how do you know there's not someone out there that will do it?
Yeah.
I don't know if his has gotten. I need to talk to him. I haven't talked to him since 20 books. So you know, unless you put it out there, you don't know who your readers are. Your readers might be a millionaire, and they want to do it, and they want to have that access. And so unless you provide it, you can't realize on it. So
don't limit ourselves, right?
No, not at all.
Don't do it. But in the same way, it's a very thing, and you have to decide how much time you want to put, just like the merchandising. Merchandising takes time away from what I'm doing is writing.
Right.
But my merchandising stuff, if anything, has grown. And we were talking about, you know, time when I went full time. I think adding on these extra things is the things that I did has made my business what it is now.
Right. That's great. This is awesome. This has just been so great. I love how your focus is really about connecting with readers. And I love that. It's been so great. Well, tell us what you think the best thing you've done to set yourself up for success has been.
I think it really does go back to that. I think what sets indie authors that are successful apart from other authors is that they are willing to interact with their fans, and they're really willing to interact with people on a personal level. I'm not talking about telling them all your deep, dark secrets. But if you talk about, hey, me and my dog went outside and, he did this weird thing, or if you just say, this is my daughter said something funny this week.
Right.
And I've used my Facebook group mainly that way from the beginning to be a very interactive place where I allow them to post things and I comment on their things and be just as genuine and authentic. And it ties into my brand of being a Southern urban fantasy author is I like to bring that Southern hospitality feel to everything that I'm doing. And I wrote a couple of books before I wrote Bless Your Heart, which started into the Trailerverse. And those two books are good books, but I haven't went back to that series because Trailerverse really took off. And I think it's because I had an intense desire to write something about the South and do something that was a positive light.
Yeah.
Because there are so many negative connotations to the South. And I think every place has some kind of negative connotation, but I really wanted to bring to light some of the really endearing things about where I live and how I grew up and the people that I've been around. And then I just extended that into my reader group.
That's great.
So those people, when they join my reader group, we tell them, welcome to the trailer park. You got your spot, and we're going to have a good time. And everybody gather around. We're going to be drinking beer and talking about NASCAR.
And our flip-flops,
flip-flops, our tank tops, and our ball caps, and and that's the kind of environment that I tried to set up from the beginning. And I don't know that I did it to say, hey, I want to be successful and this is how to be successful.
Right.
But I think that's really what put me in the position that I am now.
Yeah,
I built a base of loyal people who really stick through me when I've had the ups and downs, when I went through 2020 and all the things. This year hasn't been much better. But they're loyal. They're there. There's a core group of people there that I know. It could be 6 months before I put out a book, but when I do, they'll be there.
They'll be there to buy. Yeah.
And I think that's really where my success came in to making that connection to my readers.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, not telling your deep, dark secrets would not fall into the category of my latest TikTok. So
I love your TikToks. I love them. I was like, oh, look, there's Jamie. She's something crazy again. I love it. I love it.
Thanks. My kids are, groaning every time I put one up. But oh well.
But they're not your market, so that's okay.
They're not my market. No, my readers love them. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on today and sharing all of this that you do. It's been really helpful. I think people get some really good ideas from it. So thank you.
Yeah. And anybody ever has any questions, please. I'm an open book author where you can come to me and ask anytime or whatever. I'm on Facebook. Send me a message. I mean, if I'm asleep, I'm not going to get up and answer you. I will get back to you. I love to, just spread the joy of what I do and what really makes me happy. So.
Okay. Well, tell everybody where they can find about you and your books.
Okay. I am a KU author, so therefore my books are all on Amazon under Kimbra Swain. I have a PNR pen name, Leslie Mason. Mm-hmm. And I just started that last year, so that's a new endeavor. But KimbraSwain.com, or you can find me on Facebook. My Facebook group is Magic in Mason Jars.
Oh, I love it. Love it.
All right.
That's so great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we will have all those links at the wishidknown.com, so you can go to the show notes and find those there. And thanks to Alexa Larberg for editing and producing the podcast, and to Adriel Wiggins for doing all the admin. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.